On July 1st, 2025, something happened on a remote hilltop in northern Israel that hadn't occurred in over 2,000 years. A red heifer was sacrificed in a ritual burning ceremony. Video footage shows flames consuming an animal on a pyre, a rabbi conducting ancient rites, and witnesses claiming this moment changes everything. Some say it was just a practice run. Others insist the ritual was real and legitimate. Jewish religious authorities are divided, and the question everyone's asking is, did we just trigger the apocalypse? Before you dismiss this as religious extremism or conspiracy theory, consider what this actually represents, not as divine prophecy, but as something far more interesting. A moment when ancient religious symbols accidentally become the perfect metaphor for our technological situation right now. Let's start with what a red heifer raven is and why it matters. In certain Jewish and Christian traditions, there's this very specific requirement from the biblical book of Numbers. A completely red cow with no blemishes, no defects, never having worked or worn a yoke, must be sacrificed and burned. The ashes get mixed with water to create purification ritual that would allow priests to be cleansed and resume sacrifices at a rebuilt Jewish temple in Jerusalem. According to the prophecy, this temple's rebuilding, triggered by the red heifer sacrifice, initiates the end times, the final days, the apocalypse. For years, a Texas businessman named Byron Stinson funded breeding programs to find perfect red heifers. 5 were transported to Israel in 2022, and on July 1st of 2025, one of them was burned in a ceremony that checked most of the boxes, though not all, which is why there's controversy. The ceremony was held at 6 p.m. on a remote hilltop in northern Israel, with the heifer driven from Shiloh in the West Bank. But here's the catch. The ceremony wasn't held on the Mount of Olives near Jerusalem's old city as it traditionally required. And some Jewish leaders say it doesn't meet all the requirements they support. According to Byron Stinson, it was the first in 2,000 years, and all the requirements found in the actual Torah were met, though not all additional Jewish traditions were satisfied. So, did it count? This depends on who you ask. The Temple Institute, the main organization preparing for temple rebuilding, says it doesn't. The heifer was disqualified. However, some Jewish voices say yes, it was legitimate. And there are even claims that people sprinkled with the ashes have been healed. This ambiguity is important. We'll come back to it. Now, why would a perfect red cow have anything to do with the end of the world? That seems quite arbitrary, right? But step back and look at the larger biblical pattern this sits within. Specifically, the story of Adam and Eve. In Genesis, humans eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. This isn't just learning stuff, it's acquiring moral consciousness. Suddenly, Adam and Eve understand right from wrong. They can choose evil deliberately. They become capable of cruelty, not just harm. That's what separates us from animals. Animals kill instinctively, without malice. However, humans can torture, can inflict suffering for pleasure or ideology, because we understand what we are doing. God's response is immediate. Expel them from the garden before they eat from the other tree, the tree of life, which grants immortality. Why? Well, because immortal beings with the knowledge of good and evil have already shown they'll disobey when tempted, would be catastrophically dangerous. Eternal life plus moral consciousness without wisdom equals disaster. That is the template. From knowledge we go to power, and then to existential risk. Now, fast forward to 2025. We're not in Eden anymore, but we are approaching the tree of life through a different path. We're developing CRISPR gene editing that can rewrite DNA with increasing precision. Artificial intelligence systems that can outperform humans in complex tasks. Life extension research aiming to dramatically extend human lifespan. Synthetic biology that can create organisms that have never existed. And here's where the red heifer stops being a weird religious artifact and becomes a threshold symbol. A perfect red heifer, genetically flawless, meeting extremely specific criteria, can only be guaranteed through advanced genetic engineering and breeding programs backed by modern biotechnology. The ability to produce this animal isn't the point. The ability itself is the signal. When we have sufficient mastery over biological systems to engineer genetic perfection to specification, we have demonstrated something far bigger. We can now manipulate life at its source code. We are approaching creative omnipotence over living things. The red heifer ceremony isn't causing anything, it's announcing something. It is saying humanity has reached the technological capability to play God. Here's the uncomfortable part. Me, personally, I don't literally believe a cow sacrifice triggers divine intervention. That's not how I believe reality works. The idea that God is watching breeding programs in Texas and waiting for the right heifer seems to me quite absurd. But here's what makes this framework compelling, even to skeptics. It accidentally captures something real about the moment we're living through. We're developing technologies that fundamentally alter what it means to be human, not incrementally, qualitatively. The ability to edit human embryos, create artificial superintelligence, extend lifespan indefinitely, merge human consciousness with machines, these aren't just new tools, they're new categories of power. And the honest question is, are we wise enough to wield them? Religious frameworks have been asking this question for millennia. What happens when humans gain powers we're not equipped to handle? The answer, encoded in myths across cultures, is always the same: catastrophe. Not because God punishes us, but because power without wisdom is inherently unstable. The Red Heifer theory does something clever. It says that technological mastery itself becomes theological significance. When we can create genetic perfection, we're already at the threshold. The sacrifice is just making it visible. Now, we hit the philosophical bind that makes this whole discussion actually matter. Modern secular thinking, specifically postmodern philosophy, has successfully deconstructed all meta-narratives. We've shown that claims to absolute truth are just power plays dressed up in grand language. There is no cosmic meaning, no ultimate purpose, no moral law written into fabric or reality. Which logically means there's no reason not to pursue any technology we can develop. There's no sacred boundary, no forbidden knowledge, no wisdom tradition without worth respecting. Just individual preferences on the raw biological drives from pleasure and survival. Without meta-narrative, ethics becomes opinion. The only remaining guide is instinct. Seek pleasure, avoid pain, maximize self-interest. Why care about the long-term consequences of genetic engineering or artificial superintelligence? There's no transcending meaning to protect, no sacred human nature to preserve. This is the reductionist endpoint of radical skepticism. If nothing matters, ultimately, the, then the only rational stance is immediate self interest. But now, here's the trap. If this is true, if there really is no wisdom worth heeding, then there's also no reason to expect things to turn out well. No moral arc bending towards justice, no invisible hand guiding progress, no guarantee that human cleverness leads to human flourishing, just consequences. Remember the controversy over whether the July 1st ceremony counted? That ambiguity is perfect. It mirrors our actual situation. We don't know if we've crossed the threshold yet. We can edit genes, but not perfectly. We have AI, but not AGI. We're extending lifespan, but not dramatically. We're in this liminal space where we have immense power, but not total mastery. The debate over whether the red heifer was legitimate, whether it met all requirements, whether the location was right, whether the religious authorities approve, is actually a debate about whether whether we're ready for what comes next. Like that ceremony, we're proceeding anyway, with disagreement, with controversy, with some voices saying this is it, and others saying not yet. But the technology keeps advancing, the capabilities keep growing, the threshold keeps getting closer. So, what is the Red Heifer theory actually telling us? It's not predicting supernatural intervention, it's encoding a warning that has been transmitted across millennia because it's based on observable patterns of human behavior. Every time humans gain transformative power, we underestimate the consequences. Fire gave us civilization and weapons. Nuclear fission gave us energy and bombs. Social media gave us connection and psychological manipulation at scale. Every major technological shift creates second order effects we did not anticipate and often can't control. Genetic engineering plus artificial superintelligence plus life extension represents a fundamentally different category of risk. Not because God will punish us, but because we're modifying the basic parameters of human existence without understanding the system we're part of. The end times don't require supernatural causes, they just require that we successfully do what we're trying to do, without the wisdom to foresee all the ways it could go catastrophically wrong. Interestingly, Hamas has admitted that red heifers were one of the reasons for the October 7th attack on Israel. That's not prophecy, that's geopolitics. But it shows how these symbolic acts have real world consequences. The deeper issue is this: we're making civilizational level decisions about technologies that could reshape humanity, and we're doing it incrementally, through market forces and scientific curiosity, without ever having a collective conversation about whether we should. Nobody voted on whether we should develop CRISPR. Nobody had a referendum on artificial general intelligence. Nobody asked humanity as a whole, shouldn't we pursue the technological capability to become effectively immortal? We're just doing it because we can, because it's interesting, because there's money in it, because stopping seems impossible anyway. The Red Heifer ceremony, controversial, ambiguous, disputed, is almost a perfect metaphor for our situation. We're conducting the ritual whether or not all requirements are met, whether or not we're ready, whether or not we're understanding